The car keys felt heavier than usual in my hand, a small, cool weight that seemed to carry the full burden of my 78 years. It wasn't the keys themselves, of course, but what they represented: freedom, independence, the simple, unquestioned ability to get myself wherever I needed to go, whenever I needed to go there. My beige sedan, reliable but no longer new, sat in the driveway, a silent, four-wheeled promise I was starting to question. Lately, getting behind the wheel felt less like liberation and more like strapping into a mild anxiety attack. The highway felt faster, the signs blurrier at dusk, other drivers seemed like aggressive, unpredictable particles in a chaotic physics experiment. It wasn't a sudden crisis, no accident, thank God, but a slow, creeping realization that the road felt different. More dangerous. And so did I, in control of 2 tons of metal moving at questionable speeds. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm a widow of 3 years, I bake passable apple pies, I still wear my late husband George's comfy old sweaters around the house, and I used to love driving. Not, like, fast and furious love, but the quiet satisfaction of pointing the car towards the grocery store, the library, my bridge club across town, or just taking a drive when the restlessness
the
hit.
place dedicated to helping you
Driving was
navigate
my
the changes that
punctuation
come
mark
with
on the
age,
sentence of the day.
empowering you to live healthier,
It was
smarter,
proof I was
and with
still in the
greater
game.
independence each and every day.
Now, the punctuation was getting messy. Every time I got behind the wheel, a little voice, sounding suspiciously like my daughter Sarah, would whisper in my ear, "Are you sure about this, Mom?" My dreams, usually harmless jumbles of unfinished knitting projects and conversations with George, had started featuring scenarios where I couldn't find my car in a parking lot, or the gas pedal wouldn't work, or I was stuck at an intersection with horns blaring. My anxieties, once focused on things like whether the cat, Chairman Meow, a very opinionated Siamese, had enough tuna, were now centered on things like merging onto I-94 or parallel parking. The signs were subtle at first. George used to do most of the night driving anyway, claiming my owl eyes were better for reading in dim light, not navigating rush hour after sunset. After he passed, I just avoided it. Then highway speeds felt excessive. My reaction time felt like it was sponsored by molasses. Parking garages became labyrinths of potential fender benders. I even started opting for the self-checkout at the grocery store just to avoid the awkward shuffle of finding my keys in my purse while juggling bags, a small choreography of aging I found increasingly irritating. It was like my body was staging a quiet rebellion, and the car keys were the symbol of its protest. My hands would feel a little shaky putting the key in the ignition, my heart would beat a little faster pulling out of the driveway. It was a constant low hum of anxiety. Then came the conversations. Sarah was gentle, bless her heart. "Mom," she started one Sunday brunch, have you thought about maybe not driving at night anymore?" It was phrased as a question, but it felt like a verdict. My stomach clenched. "I already don't," I said, maybe a little too sharply. She backed off, but the seed of doubt was planted. My doctor, during my last physical, had been more direct, masked as concern. "Eleanor, your vision is still adequate for driving, but perhaps limiting yourself to daytime, familiar routes?" He looked at me kindly, but his words landed heavily. "Safety is key," he added, a gentle reminder that my safety, and everyone else's on the road, was now a topic of discussion, not a given. It felt like the world was conspiring to take my keys away, piece by piece. My fear of losing independence, my absolute terror of becoming a burden to Sarah or my friends, started to feel very, very real. The thought of having to ask for a ride felt like swallowing a pride stone. I imagined being trapped in my house, unable to spontaneously go grab milk or just drive to that park with the nice walking path. It was a terrifying picture. It felt like the walls were closing in. One particularly rainy Tuesday, after a white-knuckle drive home from the library where every car felt like a potential threat, I sat in the driveway, hands still gripping the steering wheel, heart hammering. It had taken me 20 minutes to find a parking spot that didn't require parallel parking, and backing out had felt like defusing a bomb. I finally turned off the engine, the silence in the car profound. "Okay, Eleanor," I whispered to the dashboard, the vinyl smelling faintly of old perfume and despair. "This isn't working anymore." The decision wasn't made in a single dramatic moment, but in a slow, quiet accumulation of fear and near misses, punctuated by worried glances from Sarah and gentle nudges from my doctor. It was less a decision, more an acceptance of an undeniable reality. Driving, as I knew and loved it, was becoming a liability. The keys weren't just heavy, they felt like chains. But if I wasn't driving, how was I supposed to live? This was the terrifying question that loomed. My social life, my errands, my little bursts of spontaneity, they all involved getting in the car. It felt like stepping to the edge of a cliff. But maybe, just maybe, that cliff wasn't the end of the world, but the edge of a different landscape. A landscape where independence wasn't measured in miles driven, but in resourcefulness and connection. You can't cross the sea merely by standing and staring at the water, Rabindranath Tagore wrote. Okay, Tagore, point taken. Time to start swimming, or at least find a boat. The first alternative that popped into everyone's mind, usually offered with a slightly too bright smile, was rideshare apps, Uber, Lyft. "It's so easy, Mom. You just tap your phone." Sarah had shown me. My inner monologue was less enthusiastic. Tap my phone? The one that autocorrects my texts into surrealist poetry? The one that loses its charge if you look at it funny? The technology itself felt like a barrier. Downloading the app, setting up payment, figuring out how to pinpoint my location, am I at the front door or the back alley? Does it matter if Chairman Meow is judging from the window? Then there was the awkwardness of getting into a stranger's car. Were they safe? Would they make small talk? Would they judge the slightly too bright floral pattern on my purse? My fear of being a burden morphed into a fear of technological incompetence and trusting strangers. But after one particularly frustrating attempt to coordinate schedules with a friend that felt like an international peace negotiation, I reluctantly tried Uber. The first driver was a lovely young woman who chatted about her cat. The second was a quiet man who played classical music. It wasn't the same as driving myself, not the same feeling of absolute control, but it was efficient. It was surprisingly convenient. It felt like a small victory, navigating this new digital landscape. It wasn't freedom on my terms, maybe, but it was access. And access, it turns out, is a pretty good substitute for freedom when your keys are weighing you down. Then there were the senior transportation services. Less spontaneous than rideshare, more scheduled. Our city had a program, reliable minivans that took seniors to appointments, grocery stores, social centers. The process involved calling a day in advance, coordinating pickup times, sometimes sharing the ride with others. It felt less intimidating than rideshare. The drivers were trained to assist seniors, the vans were equipped for accessibility. The humor here was in the scheduling. Trying to remember to book things a day ahead felt like planning a lunar landing. My fear of losing spontaneity was definitely triggered here. But the reliability was a comfort. It was a structured independence, less wild and free than driving, but dependable. It became my go-to for doctor's appointments and major grocery runs. It wasn't zipping off when the mood struck, but it was getting there, predictably and safely. It was a different rhythm. Like learning to dance to a new beat. As Duke Ellington said, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Well, senior transport had a different kind of swing, a slower, more deliberate one, but it still got you on the dance floor of life. And then there was the most emotionally fraught alternative, asking for rides. This felt like the ultimate surrender, the moment you truly admit you can't do it yourself. Asking Sarah felt like adding one more thing to her already overflowing plate. Asking friends felt like being a burden, trading independence for a favor. My pride bristled at the thought. Can you possibly, when you have a moment, no pressure at all, if it's not too much trouble? The awkward preamble felt heavier than my keys ever had. But my friends were wonderful. Eleanor, just call. I'm happy to swing by. Of course, I can take you. Their generosity was humbling. It shifted the dynamic from pure independence to interdependence, a realization that maybe relying on each other wasn't a weakness, but a different kind of strength, a different way of being connected. It forced me to be vulnerable, to admit need, which was terrifying and unexpectedly connecting. It wasn't the freedom of the open road, but the warmth of human connection, a reminder that my value wasn't tied to my ability to operate heavy machinery. Beyond getting from point A to point B, adapting also meant rethinking my routine. Could I consolidate errands? Could I order groceries online? More technology hurdles, more opportunities for Chibuchef to judge my screen-tapping skills. Could I find social activities closer to home instead of driving across town? The local senior center, which I'd previously dismissed as not for me, suddenly looked more appealing. It offered bridge games, book clubs, even exercise classes. It wasn't the spontaneous road trip I used to dream of, but it was connection, community, right in my neighborhood. It required a mental shift, a willingness to explore and adapt, like a pioneer charting new territory, albeit in my own zip code. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance, said Alan Watts. Okay, Alan, let's dance, even if the music is different. The trade-offs are real, of course. None of the alternatives felt exactly like hopping in my car and just going. There was scheduling, waiting, relying on others, the loss of absolute spontaneity. It felt like exchanging a wide-open field of options for a few well-trodden paths. My dream of taking a solo drive up the coast like I did with George felt like a distant memory. The fear of losing that specific freedom was a real grief. But here's the unexpected part, the plot twist I didn't see coming. There was a new kind of freedom in letting go of the keys. The freedom from anxiety. The freedom from stress about traffic, about getting lost, about parking, about potential accidents. The relief of not having that little voice of fear in my ear every time I left the driveway. It was a freedom from something, rather than a freedom to go anywhere. And that freedom from anxiety was surprisingly, profoundly liberating. It was like trading in a high-performance sports car that was falling apart for a comfortable, reliable train, less flash, but a smoother, safer journey. My identity shifted. I was no longer defined by my ability to drive, but by my ability to adapt, to connect, to navigate challenges with resilience and a, sometimes sarcastic, sense of humor. I still baked apple pies, still wore George's sweaters. My independence wasn't lost, it had simply changed form. It was in confidently booking my rideshare, in gratefully accepting a ride from a friend, in exploring my local community, in mastering online ordering. It was independence built on connection and resourcefulness, rather than purely on self-reliance. It was a different kind of strength. This journey, from the heavy keys in my hand to navigating rideshares and asking for help, wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was about redefining independence, about accepting the changes that come with aging not as limitations, but as invitations to adapt and explore new possibilities. It was about letting go of one symbol of freedom to find freedom in unexpected places. My dreams are less about driving solo road trips now, and more about spontaneous coffee dates I can get to with a quick tap on my phone, or deep conversations with friends who give me rides. My fears of being a burden are still there, but they are balanced by the warmth of interdependence. My anxieties about driving have been replaced by a quiet confidence in my ability to figure things out, one ride, one app, one asked favor at a time. It's a different chapter, a different mode of transport, but the journey of living, connecting, and finding joy is still very much in progress. As the philosopher Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Well, I reacted by finding alternative routes and rediscovering the kindness of strangers and friends. And that, it turns out, is a pretty great destination.